Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world where bathing wasn't just about staying clean. It was a whole ritual, a daily dance with purity and power. Imagine yourself trudging through the bustling streets of ancient Egypt, the sun beating down on the packed mud bricks, the smells of the Nile mingling with spices, sweat, and, well, probably not great hygiene by modern standards. You might think you're ready to get squeaky clean after a long day. But hold on. These folks had bathing routines that mixed religion, health, and downright weird ingredients you probably won't survive trying at home. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Makes this whole bedtime story feel like a cozy global campfire. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first step in this sleepy stroll through ancient Egyptian life is to picture a day in their world where cleanliness wasn't a casual thing. It was essential. They saw hygiene as both a practical and spiritual matter, a way to maintain order and harmony with the cosmos. You wake up, and the day starts with washing. Not just your face, but your whole body. Sometimes multiple times a day, because to them, dirt was more than physical grime. It was a kind of spiritual pollution. They believed keeping clean was a way to keep evil forces at bay and please their gods. Imagine the bustling markets, the priests in their pristine linen robes, the nobles draped in fine fabrics. They all had their own version of cleanliness. The whole society revolved around this cult of purity, where bathing was as much a ritual as it was hygiene. The wealthy had servants to prepare their baths and special perfumes to keep them smelling sweet, while common folks used simpler means, but still understood the importance of washing regularly. Historians still argue whether daily bathing was truly widespread or mostly reserved for the elite and religious figures. But the evidence is clear that cleanliness was deeply embedded in Egyptian culture. You probably didn't have to worry about soap like we do, but they had their own creative, if sometimes peculiar, solutions. One mainstream historical fact to start with. Archaeological finds show plenty of basins and water jars in homes and temples, suggesting bathing was common and well practiced. But the quirky bit, some records hint that priests sometimes cleansed themselves with a mix that included fermented milk. Yes, milk gone sour, not exactly your average bubble bath. So, as you settle in, picture the ancient Egyptians' daily rituals unfolding, not just scrubbing away the day, but engaging in a holistic cleansing of body and soul. The next sections will reveal exactly how this all worked, where the Nile came in, and why they were so obsessed with fermented milk as a bathing ingredient. The Nile is more than just a river flowing through Egypt. It's basically the bloodstream of the entire civilization, pulsing life into deserts and cities alike. You trudge alongside its muddy banks, the water's surface shimmering under the relentless sun, and you realize that this giant river is both a blessing and a curse for cleanliness. On one hand, it provides water, essential for washing and survival. On the other, it's a magnet for mud, bacteria, and all sorts of ancient grime that you definitely don't want lingering on your skin. The Nile's annual flooding deposits rich silt that turns the farmland into lush, productive soil, but that same silt and organic matter can make bathing a bit complicated. Imagine dipping into water that's sometimes murky, sometimes full of weeds, and occasionally crawling with critters, crocs, snakes, and all the fun Nile wildlife. You're not exactly stepping into a spa, but rather a natural water source that's as vital as it is messy. You might think, why not just boil the water or treat it somehow? Well, you're in ancient times. Remember, technology was more sticks and stones than water filters. Instead, Egyptians developed clever ways to keep clean despite the Nile's challenges. They used buckets and basins to bring cleaner water from wells or cisterns for personal hygiene rather than bathing directly in the river. The Nile was also crucial for agriculture and drinking water, so they had to balance its use carefully. Here's a mainstream fact. The Nile's annual flood cycle was so reliable that Egyptians structured their entire calendar and religious festivals around it. That regularity also shaped how they managed water use for bathing and cleaning. However, historians still argue whether common folk had daily access to clean water or if that privilege belonged mostly to urban centers and the elite. Now for a quirky tidbit. The Nile wasn't just a water source, but also a carrier of, well, let's say less glamorous substances. Some in ancient texts and archaeological finds suggest that Egyptians sometimes used animal and even human waste in fertilizer. Yep, not the stuff you want near your bath. That makes the emphasis on personal cleanliness all the more impressive and necessary. Your nose probably wrinkles just thinking about this. But remember, the Nile was central to Egyptian life and death. It brought fresh water for washing, but also the germs and grime that made cleanliness a serious daily battle, balancing the gift and grime of the Nile. Egyptians became experts in managing water carefully, not just for their crops, but for their sacred bodies. As you imagine splashing water from a well or basin in a hot Egyptian courtyard, feel how that mix of relief and challenge shaped their bathing habits. They knew they needed water to stay clean, but the water itself wasn't always inviting. This tension sets the stage for why they turned to some surprising ingredients, like fermented milk, to keep themselves fresh and pure. You probably think soap has always been the go-to for cleanliness, but in ancient Egypt, soap as we know it was still a few centuries away. So what did you do if you wanted to get clean and didn't have a bar of soap handy? Spoiler alert. The Egyptians got creative with natural ingredients that might seem odd or even off-putting today. When you wash yourself in ancient Egypt, it's not a simple lather, rinse, repeat situation. Instead, you reach for a mixture of oils and alkaline substances, which worked like early soap, except they didn't produce suds like the bubbly stuff we're used to. They made a paste or scrub from things like animal fats and ash, or crushed plants like natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture harvested from dry lake beds. This combo helped break down oils and dirt, leaving skin cleaner and somewhat exfoliated. The mainstream fact here is that archaeologists have found remnants of soap-like materials in tombs and settlements dating back to at least 1500 BCE. These early soaps weren't the kind you'd find in a fancy boutique, but were effective enough for their purposes. Natron, especially, played a huge role. It was also used in mummification, which tells you how important it was for cleansing and preserving both the living and the dead. Historians still argue whether these early soap substitutes were used daily or just for special occasions, like before religious ceremonies or important events. It's a fair debate because while some texts suggest regular use, others imply that oil and sand scrubs might have been more common day to day. Now, for a quirky fact, Egyptians sometimes used abrasive materials like sand or ground-up volcanic rock as a scrub. Imagine scrubbing your skin with a gritty paste that probably made you feel cleaner, but might have left you looking a bit raw. No gentle exfoliation here. They were tough. Those ancient folks, and before you start feeling sorry for them, Remember that their skin was more accustomed to such rough care, thanks to the harsh desert environment. Also, don't forget the oils. After scrubbing, you'd rub your skin with fragrant oils made from plants like lotus or myrrh, which kept your skin soft, smelled nice, and acted as a barrier against the drying sun. You're basically your own walking aromatherapy session, if you ignore the gritty scrub part. In sum, while soap as a bubbly invention hadn't arrived yet, Egyptians were already mastering the art of cleaning themselves with what they had: ash, fats, sand, and oils. Not exactly spa day, but hey, it worked. So next time you're lathering up with modern soap, remember those ancient scrubs and oils that got the job done long before soap bars became a thing. And stick around. Next, we'll dive into the surprising role fermented milk played in all this, proving that Egyptian bathing was far more interesting than you might have guessed. Now, let's switch gears and talk about something that might make you pause: fermented milk. You probably think of milk as a drink, maybe a quick snack or ingredient in a smoothie. But in ancient Egypt, fermented milk wasn't just for sipping, it was woven into culture, medicine, and yes, even bathing. You're about to find out why sour milk mattered way more than you expected. Fermented milk, which means milk that's been allowed to sour naturally with helpful bacteria, was a staple in ancient Egyptian diets. It had longer shelf life and offered probiotics before anyone called them that. But beyond its nutritional role, this tangy substance was also believed to have cleansing and healing powers. Egyptians were pioneers in noticing that fermented dairy products could do more than feed. They could nurture the skin and body from the outside too. The mainstream fact is that dairy farming was widespread in Egypt, especially with cows, goats, and sheep supplying milk for all classes. Archaeological finds include pottery shards with residue that's been identified as fermented milk products, like yogurt and buttermilk. Confirming its importance, Egyptians prized these products not just for eating, but for medicinal uses. Fermented milk was considered to soothe digestive troubles and promote health. But here's the quirky bit. Bathing in fermented milk wasn't just a folk tale. It was practiced as a beauty and health treatment. Picture a queen or priestess soaking in a bath infused with sour milk, believing it would soften skin, protect against infections, and maybe even slow aging. You're basically stepping into a natural probiotic spa, centuries before commercial beauty brands got the memo. Historians still argue whether this was an elite luxury or a more common practice across different social groups. But the records point toward it being highly valued in ritual and medical contexts. The chemistry behind it is fascinating. The lactic acid in fermented milk acts as a gentle exfoliant, breaking down dead skin cells and encouraging new ones to grow. It also has antibacterial properties, which could help with skin irritations or infections. Pretty handy in a world without antibiotics or dermatologists. This makes the milk bath not just a comfort, but a functional health tool. Now, imagine the smell: tangy, creamy, and perhaps a little funky. Definitely not the fresh cucumber spa vibe we crave today. But for Egyptians, that tang was a sign of the milk's power. And the results were worth it. So, fermented milk wasn't just a food or a quirky experiment. It was a multi-purpose potion for health, hygiene, and even status. Coming up, we'll unpack exactly why this fermented milk was such a practical choice for bathing, blending chemistry and culture in a way that's still surprising to modern minds. You might be wondering, what exactly made fermented milk a smart pick for bathing? Was it just a trendy beauty hack? Or was there some real chemistry magic happening in those sour milk baths? Let's dive into the science. Well, ancient style, behind why fermented milk was more than just a smelly curiosity. Fermented milk contains lactic acid, a mild alpha-hydroxy acid, which, as you might know if you've ever dipped a toe into the skincare world, is a natural exfoliant. This acid helps break down dead skin cells gently, encouraging fresh, smooth skin to shine through. Imagine soaking in a bath that's like a natural chemical peel, without the harshness or the sting. For Egyptians, this meant healthier-looking skin that felt soft and clean, even in the dusty, sun-baked desert environment. But the benefits don't stop there. Lactic acid also has antibacterial properties, which is a big deal when you consider how limited medical treatments were back then. This meant that bathing in fermented milk might have helped reduce skin infections, soothe irritations, and keep pesky microbes at bay. In a place where heat, sweat, and dust were constant companions, this was practically a health lifesaver. Here's the mainstream fact. Modern science confirms that lactic acid can improve skin texture, hydration, and even help with mild acne and pigmentation issues. Egyptians were unwitting skincare pioneers, tapping into these benefits long before lotions and potions became mainstream. Historians still argue whether Egyptians understood the chemistry behind fermented milk, or simply learned through trial and error that it worked wonders. Did they grasp why it was effective, or did they rely more on tradition and religious belief? The debate continues. But either way, the practice endured for centuries. Now for a quirky twist. Fermented milk baths were sometimes mixed with other ingredients. Think honey, oils, or fragrant herbs to mask the sour smell and boost the soothing effects. You can imagine a bath where the tangy milk aroma wrestled with sweet floral scents, creating an atmosphere that was both healing and a little confusing for the nose. The preparation of these baths was likely a delicate art, requiring time to ferment milk just right, mix it with other additives, and warm the water to a comfortable temperature. You can almost hear the servants bustling about, making sure everything was perfect for the noble soaking session. So, fermented milk wasn't just a smelly byproduct. It was a carefully crafted, multifunctional bathing agent, blending natural chemistry with cultural ritual. Up next, we'll explore how these bathing practices fit into the bigger picture of Egyptian religion and the cult of cleanliness. The ancient Egyptians didn't just see cleanliness as a physical need. It was a sacred duty, woven tightly into their spiritual lives. As you imagine stepping into a warm milk bath, think about how that act wasn't just about looking good or staying healthy. It was a ritual of purity, an offering to the gods, and a way to keep cosmic order intact. To the Egyptians, dirt and pollution weren't just messy. They were signs of chaos and evil forces creeping into the world. Purity was essential to maintain Ma'at, the divine order that balanced the universe. Cleansing the body was a way of cleansing the soul. And so bathing became a holy practice that priests and nobles took seriously. You could say the more spotless your skin, the closer you were to the gods. One mainstream fact: temples often had dedicated areas for ritual washing, with priests cleansing themselves thoroughly before performing ceremonies. This wasn't just hygiene, but a spiritual preparation. Even the pharaoh was expected to bathe and dress impeccably to embody divine perfection. Now for the quirky stuff. Did you know that sometimes priests would use crocodile dung as sunscreen? It sounds wild. But this sticky concoction supposedly protected the skin from the brutal Egyptian sun. While it probably didn't smell great, it's a reminder that their approach to cleanliness and skincare was both practical and experimental. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread practice or more of a niche remedy. The connection between cleanliness and gods also meant that certain substances, like water from the Nile, fragrant oils, and yes, fermented milk, were considered sacred. Baths were sometimes conducted near sacred pools or in temples, turning a daily hygiene routine into a spiritual event. This blending of the sacred and the mundane highlights how central purity was in Egyptian life. You might chuckle thinking about these elaborate routines. But for Egyptians, the stakes were high. Cleanliness was protection against spiritual decay, a way to honor the gods, and a public display of status and devotion. When you picture their bathing rituals, don't just see scrubbing and soaking. Imagine prayers whispered, incense burning, and the solemn sense that this was more than just a bath. As the sun sets on this spiritual scene, get ready to meet some of the strangest Egyptian hygiene habits yet, because nothing says ancient beauty quite like crocodile dung sunscreen. Up next, more bizarre bathing practices that show just how inventive and sometimes gross these rituals could get. If you thought crocodile dung sunscreen was the strangest thing ancient Egyptians used, then prepare yourself to delve into an astonishing world of hygiene, beauty, and health practices that might surprise, amuse, and sometimes even unsettle you. The ancient Egyptian approach to cleanliness and skincare was a fascinating blend of practical innovation, religious belief, cultural tradition, and yes, some downright bizarre methods, far from being careless or primitive. They treated hygiene with a seriousness and creativity that many modern societies can admire, even if the means sometimes seem odd to us today. To understand why they embraced such strange practices, one must first appreciate the environment and worldview in which these habits evolved. Egypt's blistering desert heat, relentless sun, and dusty landscape posed immense challenges to personal care. The Nile River, while a source of life and fertility, also brought humidity and mud that could clog pores and foster disease. In a place where clean water was precious and the sun merciless, keeping skin healthy and protected wasn't just vanity. It was essential for survival. And so, the ancient Egyptians developed a hygiene toolkit that was surprisingly comprehensive and sophisticated. Let's begin with one of the most infamous components of that kit: crocodile dung sunscreen. Yes, it sounds grotesque, and it was probably not the most pleasant-smelling concoction, but it was seriously believed to have protective qualities. The method involved drying crocodile droppings, crushing them into powder, and mixing them with fats or oils to create a kind of paste. This paste was then applied to the skin as a shield against the harsh ultraviolet rays of the sun. Why crocodile dung? This question speaks to their fearless experimentation with natural resources. Crocodiles inhabited the Nile and surrounding areas, and their waste might have been abundant and accessible. More importantly, the Egyptians believed in the mystical and medicinal properties of many natural substances in their cosmology. Many materials were linked to divine forces, healing powers, or protective qualities. Crocodile dung likely carried symbolic weight as well as practical use. Scientifically, while it's doubtful that crocodile dung offered any real UV protection comparable to modern sunscreens, the fats and oils in the mixture might have provided some barrier against sunburn. The lactic acid in fermented milk, which we will explore later, and oils could have moisturized and soothed sun-damaged skin. It is this combination of crude chemistry and spiritual belief that made such treatments enduring. Moving beyond this unusual sunscreen, it's important to highlight that ancient Egyptian skincare and cosmetics involved ingredients that were both effective and potentially hazardous. Archaeological discoveries, including residues on pottery shards, texts on papyrus, and preserved cosmetic containers, reveal widespread use of metals like lead, copper, and antimony. Lead, for instance, was commonly used in kohl, the iconic black eye makeup worn by men and women alike. It wasn't just decorative. Lead compounds have antimicrobial properties. So wearing kohl helped protect against eye infections, especially in dusty or unsanitary conditions. However, lead is highly toxic, and repeated exposure could cause lead poisoning. Whether Egyptians understood the risks is unclear. They likely prioritized the immediate benefits over long-term harm, as many cultures have done throughout history. Copper was also used for its antiseptic qualities, often in ointments and powders intended to heal wounds or prevent infection. Antimony, a metalloid element, featured in beauty products and might have had antibacterial properties as well. These ingredients reflect a remarkable practical knowledge of materials and their effects, even if the science behind their dangers was not fully grasped. Cosmetics in ancient Egypt went far beyond eye makeup. People applied scented oils and balms to their skin, and fragrance powders to their hair. The use of essential oils from myrrh, frankincense, and other aromatic plants was both cosmetic and religious, invoking protection and purification. Turning now to dental care. One of the more surprising aspects of Egyptian hygiene is their approach to teeth. Archaeological finds reveal a surprisingly advanced dental culture. Ancient Egyptians understood the importance of clean teeth and fresh breath, albeit with methods that might seem abrasive or unusual by modern standards. They crafted toothpaste from a mixture of crushed rock salt, which acted as an abrasive cleanser, combined with fragrant mint and dried iris flowers to mask odors and freshen breath. Some recipes even included powdered ox hooves, adding a gritty texture that would definitely feel like sandpaper against enamel. Despite the roughness, these concoctions aimed to remove plaque and food debris, maintaining oral health in an era without dentists or fluoride. The fact that dental care was taken seriously is also evident in the high incidence of tooth wear and abscesses found in mummies and skeletal remains, suggesting that they did their best to mitigate common dental problems. The combination of coarse foods and dusty environments made oral hygiene challenging. But these early dental remedies show a proactive approach to health. Another fascinating, and for some, eyebrow-raising practice was hair removal in a hot and arid climate. Keeping the body free from lice and dirt was essential. Egyptians shaved their heads frequently and often removed all body hair using various methods, including waxing with resins and pastes made from natural substances. The elite went a step further by wearing elaborately crafted wigs made from human hair or plant fibers. These wigs were fashion statements and also practical, as they allowed wearers to keep their scalp clean while protecting the head from sunburn. Maintaining these wigs was an involved process, requiring special soaps, oils, and careful washing routines. Though luxurious, this grooming likely carried a distinct odor from the combination of oils and natural substances used. Priests, considered intermediaries between gods and people, often practiced extreme cleanliness, shaving their entire bodies regularly to maintain ritual purity. This extreme grooming reflected not only hygiene, but spiritual discipline, emphasizing how intertwined physical and spiritual cleanliness were in Egyptian culture. Bathing itself was an elaborate affair, quite different from our quick showers or bath rituals today. Ancient Egyptians used tools that might seem crude, but were effective. Instead of soft loofahs or synthetic sponges, They scrubbed themselves with natural materials such as sisal fibers, a tough plant fiber, or even coarse scraps of linen cloth. These tools helped exfoliate the skin and remove dirt and sweat. They also employed abrasive substances like sand and ash as cleansers. While these might sound harsh to our modern sensibilities, in the absence of gentle chemical exfoliants, these natural abrasives were useful for thoroughly cleaning the body. The constant dust and grime of desert life meant that a robust scrubbing was necessary to maintain hygiene. This curious combination of natural chemistry, practical innovation, and cultural ritual illustrates the Egyptians' obsession with cleanliness. Their hygiene practices were not merely about comfort, but were fundamental to health, spiritual well-being, and social status. There was also an experimental aspect to Egyptian skincare and hygiene. They didn't hesitate to try new substances or mix unusual ingredients in pursuit of beauty and purity. This openness to experimentation, balanced with tradition and superstition, helped them develop a surprisingly sophisticated approach to personal care. These ancient beauty and hygiene hacks were the result of a unique mix of necessity, stemming from environmental challenges and creativity that pushed boundaries. They remind us that human beings, regardless of era, have always sought to understand their bodies and environments, sometimes embracing the strange or even the unpleasant in pursuit of health and beauty. As we explore these practices further, it's essential to remember that they were embedded in a rich cultural and religious framework. Personal cleanliness was never just about the physical. It was a sacred duty, a spiritual exercise, and a reflection of one's place in society. In the next chapter, we will journey to the places where these rituals unfolded, from the simple homes of common folk to the grand, sacred pools of temples, and see how the environment shaped and enhanced Egyptian bathing traditions. Picture yourself walking through an ancient Egyptian neighborhood, where the sun blazes overhead, unrelenting in its fierce heat, and the streets are alive with the bustle of daily life. The air is thick with the dust of the desert, swirling and settling on everything it touches. Merchants call out their wares, their voices mingling with the laughter of children darting between carts and market stalls, while goats and chickens roam freely among the crowd. The scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery blends with the earthy aroma of the Nile. And somewhere, the rhythmic pounding of workers shaping mud bricks punctuates the background noise. Amid this lively scene, you might find yourself wondering, how did people living in such a dusty, sun-baked environment find the time and space to bathe and maintain cleanliness? How did they carve out moments of refreshment in a world that offered no running water or modern conveniences? It turns out, bathing in ancient Egypt was a complex, multifaceted ritual that took place in many settings: private homes, communal spaces, and sacred temples, each with its own unique atmosphere and significance. For the average Egyptian, bathing was most commonly a home-based affair. Picture yourself entering a typical dwelling, constructed from sun-dried mud bricks, modest but functional, with a central open-air courtyard that allows the harsh sunlight to filter in and a breeze to cool the air. In the corner of this courtyard stands a large ceramic basin or an earthenware jar, filled with water carefully drawn from the Nile or a nearby well. There is no tap to turn on here. Water is precious and must be collected and conserved. Family members rely on wooden buckets and clay pots to fetch and transport this vital resource, carrying it with care to the home without plumbing. Bathing was a labor-intensive process, requiring patience and coordination. Baths were often simple and quick, a splash and scrub rather than a luxurious soak. The water might be reused or only partially fresh, yet it served its essential purpose: to wash away the ubiquitous desert dust that clung relentlessly to skin and clothing. Dust was more than a nuisance. It was the enemy of comfort and health. And washing it off brought not only physical relief, but a sense of renewal. Archaeological digs provide evidence that for wealthier Egyptians, bathing was an elevated and somewhat elaborate daily ritual. Many homes of the affluent included dedicated bathing spaces, separate from the rest of the household activities. These rooms featured built-in stone or ceramic basins, seats, and storage for fragrant oils and soft linens. Some sites reveal water containers with spouts and even early drainage channels, indicating a more sophisticated approach to water management than one might expect. In these spaces, the act of bathing transcended mere cleanliness. It became a sensory experience infused with fragrance and comfort. Oils, often scented with flowers or herbs, were applied after bathing to moisturize and perfume the skin, while fine linen cloths provided a gentle drying ritual. The careful attention to detail and the investment in these private bathing rooms underscore the importance of personal hygiene and presentation in higher social strata. Moving beyond the private home, bathing in ancient Egypt was also deeply entwined with spiritual and religious practice. Temples and sacred pools played a crucial role in the culture of cleanliness, transforming bathing into a ritual of purification that connected the physical body with the divine. Priests and priestesses, who served as intermediaries between the gods and the people, observed strict rules of cleanliness, bathing before performing sacred ceremonies to maintain spiritual purity. Temple pools, often supplied by the Nile or subterranean wells, were maintained with great care to keep their waters clean and pure. These waters were not merely functional, but sacred, imbued with symbolic significance. Bathing in these pools was thought to cleanse both body and soul, restoring harmony and aligning the individual with Ma'at, the cosmic order that governed the universe. Imagine a high priestess standing at the edge of a temple pool, the sunlight glinting on the water's surface, surrounded by towering pillars etched with hieroglyphics and images of gods and goddesses. The air is filled with the fragrance of burning incense, and soft chants echo through the temple halls. As she dips her hands or steps into the water, the ritual is at once practical and transcendent. These sacred baths were integral to temple life, serving as preparation for rituals and reinforcing the connection between cleanliness and holiness. Interestingly, some temples included specialized purification rooms, equipped with basins and even primitive drainage systems designed to carry away the water used in ablutions. This early form of plumbing was both practical and symbolic. The departing water was believed to carry impurities away, both physical dirt and spiritual defilement. This notion highlights how the ancient Egyptians intertwined their understanding of hygiene with their spiritual worldview. Cleansing was a holistic act, encompassing the body, mind, and soul. There remains ongoing debate among historians and archaeologists about how accessible these communal or temple bathing facilities were to the general populace. Were these spaces exclusively reserved for the religious elite, priests, priestesses, and royalty? Or did ordinary Egyptians also frequent public baths or sacred pools for cleansing? Evidence suggests that while many sacred bathing rituals were limited to religious practitioners and the elite, common folk likely had their own communal bathing practices, perhaps in the Nile itself or in more modest public facilities near urban centers. This coexistence of private and public, sacred and secular bathing spaces points to a society where cleanliness was valued across classes but experienced differently depending on social status. For many ordinary Egyptians, Bathing might have taken place at home in a simple basin or jar, a quick wash to remove sweat and dust. For others, especially those who could afford it, bathing was an immersive ritual filled with scented oils, soft cloths, and careful grooming. Meanwhile, at the highest social and religious levels, bathing was a symbolic act, conducted in sacred waters to affirm divine purity and cosmic balance. The environment itself shaped these bathing practices. The relentless desert heat and the annual flooding of the Nile created conditions where cleanliness was both a comfort and a necessity. Dust and sand were constant irritants, and water was a precious resource that needed to be conserved. Houses were designed to optimize ventilation and drainage, often featuring open courtyards where baths could be taken under the sky, but in relative privacy. The proximity to the Nile provided both practical access to water and spiritual significance, as the river was revered as a life-giving force and a symbol of renewal. The role of social status in bathing customs cannot be overstated. Nobles and priests enjoyed luxurious bathing environments, complete with attendants to assist in washing and anointing. Their bathing chambers were decorated and appointed with fine materials, underscoring the connection between cleanliness, wealth, and divine favor. The common people, while they might lack such luxuries, understood the importance of bathing and cleanliness and found ways within their means to maintain hygiene. The act of bathing was also a social signal, reflecting one's place in society and respect for order. Cleanliness was linked with moral virtue and health, concepts deeply embedded in Egyptian culture. This made bathing not just a personal care routine, but a public affirmation of discipline, status, and reverence for the gods. These bathing rituals were accompanied by a rich sensory experience. Fragrant oils and perfumes, prepared from flowers, herbs, and resins, scented the water and skin. The sound of water splashing in basins, the rustling of linen cloths, and the quiet prayers or chants in temple pools added layers of meaning and ambiance. Bathing was a moment of respite, a brief escape from the hardships of daily life, and a connection to the sacred. The meticulous nature of Egyptian bathing customs reveals a civilization that saw cleanliness as a cornerstone of health, spirituality, and social order. Their bathing culture was a living expression of their worldview, a blend of practicality, devotion, and artistry. It was a practice that acknowledged the physical challenges of their environment while elevating the simple act of washing into a profound ritual. As you picture these scenes, from a humble courtyard basin to a grand temple pool, consider how bathing in ancient Egypt was a multifaceted act, deeply embedded in the fabric of daily life and belief. It reminds us that even in a world without modern plumbing or showers, people found ways to nurture their bodies, souls, and communities through water and ritual. And so, your bath might be a quick rinse in a dusty courtyard or a slow, fragrant soak in sacred waters. But wherever and however you bathed, the act was rich with meaning. It was an experience shaped by the environment, the gods, and your place in society, an ancient dance of cleanliness, health, and holiness. In the chapters to come, we will continue exploring the elaborate beauty and hygiene customs of ancient Egypt, delving into the ingredients they used, the tools they crafted, and the surprising innovations that echo into our modern world. For now, let the image of that Egyptian neighborhood and its many bathing rituals linger in your mind, a testament to a people who understood that cleanliness was more than a chore, it was a sacred art. Imagine yourself strolling through the vibrant streets of an ancient Egyptian marketplace or the grand corridors of a palace. Surrounded by the rich tapestry of daily life, the mingling scents of spices, the chatter of merchants, the bustle of servants attending to their duties. Amid this lively scene, one detail stands out. Not everyone enjoys the same bathing experience. In ancient Egypt, the act of bathing was far from uniform. It was deeply influenced by social status, weaving itself into the fabric of hierarchy and culture. Cleanliness was not merely about health or comfort, but a marker of one's place in society. A silent yet visible declaration of rank, wealth, and privilege. For the common folk, farmers, laborers, craftsmen, bathing was a straightforward, practical necessity. Imagine a modest dwelling with a small courtyard, a simple basin or ceramic jar filled with water carefully drawn from the Nile or a local well, without the luxury of running water. Fetching and conserving water was a daily chore, requiring physical effort and careful planning. The common person would take what time they could spare to wash away the thick layer of dust and sweat that clung relentlessly in the hot Egyptian sun. The water might be reused or slightly murky, but it served the essential purpose of cleansing the skin and refreshing the body after a day of hard work. To scrub away grime, they often used abrasive natural materials like fine sand or natron, a naturally occurring mineral salt with cleansing properties. This rudimentary exfoliation was effective, albeit rough compared to modern standards, and was practiced not just for appearance, but for hygiene, to stave off disease and discomfort. Despite limitations in time, resources, and facilities, personal cleanliness was a widespread value. Even those with the least means understood that staying reasonably clean was crucial for health and social acceptance. Contrast this with the bathing rituals of the elite, the nobles, high priests, and royalty, whose routines were far more elaborate and imbued with ceremony. Picture yourself entering a stately home or palace chamber, where the air is thick with the fragrance of exotic oils and incense. Here, bathing is an immersive, multi-step experience that combines physical cleanliness with sensory indulgence and spiritual symbolism. Baths were drawn in large basins or tubs, often prepared with warm water infused with fragrant oils, milk, and special herbs. The use of milk, sometimes fermented, added a soothing, skin-softening element, while oils scented with flowers and resins, such as myrrh and frankincense, transformed bathing into a ritual of luxury and relaxation. Attendants and servants played an essential role in these elaborate baths. They heated the water, prepared the scented mixtures, and assisted the bather by gently washing and massaging the skin with soft cloths or natural scrubbers. This attentive care elevated bathing beyond a mundane chore, making it a moment of pampering and social display. The wealthy often enjoyed these rituals in private rooms, adorned with art and fine furnishings, where the act of bathing became a symbol of refinement and status. It was also a social occasion. Women might bathe together in groups, sharing beauty treatments and conversation, while men's bathing could be more solitary or connected to religious purification rites. The importance of bathing for the elite is vividly captured in the art and writings of the time. Tomb paintings and temple reliefs often depict noble figures surrounded by attendants holding jars of oils, perfumes, and cosmetics. These images reflect how integral bathing and grooming were to the identity and daily routine of the upper classes. Moreover, the ingredients used for bathing and beautification frequently included imported luxury items such as frankincense, myrrh, and rare oils, underscoring the global trade networks that supplied the Egyptian elite with exotic products to enhance their hygiene rituals. Such access was a clear status symbol, setting them apart from commoners whose bathing implements and ingredients were simple and locally sourced. Gender also played a distinct role in ancient Egyptian bathing customs, adding layers of social nuance to the practice. Women often bathed in groups, using these moments not only for cleanliness, but as opportunities for bonding and ritual beautification. They applied oils, perfumes, and cosmetic preparations, reinforcing social ties and preparing for public appearances or religious festivals. Men's bathing habits, by contrast, tended to be more private and functional or closely linked to spiritual purity. Certain professions, especially priests, adhered to stringent hygiene practices, bathing multiple times a day to maintain ritual cleanliness required for performing sacred duties. This frequency and dedication to purity distinguished priests from laypeople, emphasizing the sacred nature of their roles and the link between bodily cleanliness and spiritual sanctity. Scholars continue to debate the motivations behind the lavish bathing customs of the elite. Was daily bathing primarily a health measure, rooted in an understanding of hygiene? Or was it more about social signaling, a way to flaunt wealth, power, and refinement? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. The ancient Egyptians were keen observers of their environment and human physiology, recognizing the benefits of cleanliness for comfort and health. Simultaneously, bathing rituals provided a potent visual and sensory demonstration of status and religious devotion, reinforcing social hierarchies and cultural values. The contrast between the bathing routines of the common people and the elite thus mirrors the broader social stratification of ancient Egypt. Bathing was a physical necessity for all, but also a cultural practice deeply intertwined with identity and class. Your skin's cleanliness was not merely personal, but a visible marker of your social rank and your relationship with the divine order. Environmental factors played a crucial role in shaping these practices. The relentless desert sun, the dry, dusty winds, and the cyclical flooding of the Nile created conditions that demanded regular cleansing. Dust and sand were constant irritants that clung to skin and clothing. While water was a precious commodity to be used judiciously, houses were constructed to maximize ventilation and provide sheltered, private spaces for washing. Courtyards offered open-air bathing opportunities, where the natural sunlight could aid in drying and warmth. Yet these spaces also protected bathers from prying eyes. The Nile, revered as the lifeblood of Egypt, was central not only to agriculture and transportation, but also to bathing and purification. For many, bathing in the river itself was a routine act, connecting daily hygiene with the sacred currents of life. The river's water was seen as purifying, nourishing, and renewing, linking physical cleanliness with spiritual rejuvenation. The sensory dimensions of bathing in ancient Egypt were rich and carefully cultivated. Fragrant oils and perfumes scented the water and skin, derived from native plants as well as imported resins. The sound of water splashing, the soft rustle of linen drying cloths, and the subtle chants or prayers offered during temple ablutions created an immersive environment of calm and reverence. Bathing was not only a physical act, but a moment of mental and spiritual respite, a break from the demands of daily labor and a preparation for social or religious duties. This meticulous bathing culture reveals much about the values and worldview of the ancient Egyptians. Cleanliness was more than a matter of personal hygiene. It was an expression of order, health, and connection with the gods. The act of cleansing was deeply symbolic, a daily reaffirmation of Mayat, the cosmic balance and harmony that sustained life and society. As you visualize these scenes, from simple basin washes in dusty courtyards to elaborate soaks in temple pools surrounded by carved stone pillars and flickering oil lamps, consider how bathing in ancient Egypt was an intricate blend of necessity, spirituality, social custom, and artistry. It was a practice that addressed the harsh realities of the environment while elevating the human body as a sacred vessel deserving care and reverence. This ancient tradition continues to resonate, reminding us that the rituals we practice around cleanliness and self-care are rooted in a long human history. The Egyptian commitment to bathing, across all classes and contexts, shows a civilization that understood the power of water, not just to cleanse, but to heal, connect, and transform. Whether your imagined bath is a brief, utilitarian rinse or a lavish, fragrant soak, remember that in ancient Egypt, bathing was never merely a mundane chore. It was a vital practice woven into the spiritual and social fabric of life, a daily performance of health, purity, and belonging that reflected the very essence of what it meant to be Egyptian. As we continue our journey, we will delve further into the specific ingredients, tools, and innovations that shaped ancient Egyptian hygiene and beauty customs, exploring the remarkable ingenuity and cultural depth behind their celebrated rituals. For now, hold on to the image of those bustling streets and serene temple pools, and the countless hands and hearts dedicated to the sacred art of bathing in one of history's most fascinating civilizations. Now that you understand fermented milk was far from a mere dairy accident in ancient Egypt, it's time to delve into the fascinating details of how these milk baths were meticulously prepared and enjoyed. Spoiler alert. This was no simple matter of pouring sour milk into a tub and stepping in for a quick rinse. Instead, the Egyptians developed carefully crafted recipes and intricate rituals, blending practical benefits with deep spiritual significance in a way that elevated bathing into a sacred art form. Picture yourself standing in a spacious courtyard or a well-appointed chamber within a noble's home or temple, where a group of dedicated servants and attendants are busy preparing a bath for a high-ranking lady, a priestess, or perhaps even a queen. The process begins well before the bath itself, with fresh milk drawn from cows, goats, or sheep being set aside to ferment. This was no haphazard affair. The timing was crucial. The milk needed to mature for several days, reaching just the right level of tanginess and acidity. Too little fermentation, and the beneficial properties of the lactic acid wouldn't be fully developed. Too much, and the milk might spoil or become unpleasantly sour. This delicate balance was akin to the modern craft of yogurt or kefir making, where both flavor and function are carefully controlled. As the milk transformed, the next stage involved blending it with a variety of complementary ingredients. Honey, for instance, was a frequent addition valued not only for its sweet aroma, but also for its moisturizing and antibacterial properties. Floral oils distilled from native plants like lotus and jasmine enriched the bath with soothing and fragrant essences, transforming the experience into a fragrant ritual. The Egyptians also employed exotic and precious resins like frankincense and myrrh, whose smoky, rich scents help mask the natural sourness of the milk while offering additional skin-soothing and antiseptic qualities. The water itself was gently warmed, creating a comforting environment perfect for relaxing muscles and inviting the bather to unwind after a harsh day under the blazing desert sun. But this bathing ritual was never just about cleansing the body. It was a full sensory immersion. Imagine the creamy, warm water enveloping the skin, the gentle exfoliation of lactic acid softening and renewing the surface, while the mingled aromas of flowers and resins calm the mind and spirit. The air would be filled with the delicate scent of jasmine and frankincense, while soft light filtered through linen curtains, casting golden hues on the walls. Prayers and blessings would often accompany the bathing process, reinforcing the sacred aspect of cleansing, not just a physical purification, but a spiritual one. A renewal of harmony and balance aligned with the Egyptian concept of Ma'at, the divine order. This was more than just luxury or personal hygiene. It was a cultural cornerstone. Ancient medical papyri, such as the Ebers Papyrus, describe these milk baths as beneficial treatments for a range of skin ailments, from dryness and irritation to more stubborn conditions. They were also prescribed to promote general health and well-being. Additionally, these baths served as preparatory rites before religious ceremonies, important festivals, or major life events such as weddings and coronations, symbolizing purification and readiness to engage with the divine. The combination of practical health benefits and ritual significance underscores how central these milk baths were to Egyptian life. An intriguing and somewhat charming detail emerges from the ancient texts. Fermented milk baths were believed to have particular benefits for women, especially regarding fertility and youthful appearance. Priestesses and queens frequently indulged in these baths, viewing them as elixirs that preserved vitality and beauty, helping maintain a radiant complexion and youthful energy. This belief ties into the broader Egyptian obsession with eternal life, rejuvenation, and the maintenance of divine favor through bodily purity and health. The milk bath, thus, was a powerful symbol of life's renewal, a physical manifestation of the eternal cycle revered by the culture. Yet, historians continue to debate the extent to which these fermented milk baths were accessible beyond the elite. Were they part of everyday life for ordinary Egyptians? Or were they luxuries reserved for the upper classes and temple officials? The archaeological and textual evidence tends to support the latter view, suggesting that such baths were special treatments rather than daily habits. Nevertheless, the allure of fermented milk bathing, with its promises of health, beauty, and spiritual cleansing, likely captured the imagination of many across social strata. It might have inspired simpler versions or related rituals adapted to the resources available to less affluent households. As you imagine those creamy, fragrant baths, picture the elaborate preparation, the slow and deliberate soaking, the attentive care of servants, and the reverent prayers whispered amidst the warm steam. These were not random acts, but carefully orchestrated, multi-sensory experiences that seamlessly combined health, beauty, and spirituality into a single harmonious ritual. The ancient Egyptians weren't simply dabbling with dairy. They were engaging in a profound tradition that honored the body as a sacred vessel deserving of care and renewal. Looking beyond the baths themselves, fermented milk also played a significant role in Egyptian medicine. The lactic acid and probiotics inherent in these dairy products contributed to internal health, and milk-based poultices and ointments were common in treating wounds and skin conditions. The Egyptians understood, to some degree, that fermented milk possessed healing qualities that extended beyond surface cleansing. This recognition further illustrates the sophisticated empirical knowledge underpinning their cultural practices, an early form of what we might now call holistic health. The enduring fascination with fermented milk baths highlights the remarkable ingenuity of ancient Egyptian society. They harnessed the natural chemistry of fermentation, blending it with botanical expertise and spiritual insight to create a practice that resonated on multiple levels. It reminds us that ancient peoples were not merely primitive or superstitious. They were innovators and healers, observing the world keenly and applying their findings to enrich both body and soul. So, as you hold this vision of the milk bath in your mind, the thick, milky water shimmering softly, the scent of lotus and myrrh hanging in the air, the warm hands of attendants gently massaging skin. You glimpse a world where cleanliness and holiness were inseparable. You see a society that revered the act of bathing as an intimate communion with the divine and an expression of eternal renewal. The story of fermented milk baths thus invites us to reconsider our assumptions about ancient beauty and health practices. It challenges us to appreciate how deeply intertwined daily life and spirituality were in Egypt, where every action, from the mundane to the magnificent, was infused with meaning. And it beckons us to explore further the complex relationship between nature, science, and ritual that shaped one of history's most fascinating civilizations. In the next phase of this exploration, we will turn our attention to the physical settings that house these remarkable rituals. From modest private homes to grand temple pools, the spaces of bathing reveal much about Egyptian values, architecture, and social structures. We'll uncover how environment, status, and religion influenced not just how Egyptians bathed, but where, and in doing so, we will continue to unravel the rich tapestry of their daily and spiritual lives. Fermented milk in ancient Egypt was far more than just a luxurious bath additive or a beauty enhancer. It played a vital and serious role in the medical practices of the time. To understand this, one must consider the context of a world long before antibiotics, antiseptics, and modern pharmaceuticals. People relied heavily on natural remedies sourced from their environment, observing and experimenting with ingredients that offered relief and healing. Fermented milk, with its unique combination of lactic acid, probiotics, and natural enzymes, emerged as one such invaluable resource in the ancient Egyptian medical toolkit. The ancient Egyptians' medical papyri, detailed manuscripts that document their knowledge and treatment methods, frequently mention fermented milk and dairy products as essential components of their healing regimen. These texts recommend fermented milk for a variety of ailments, ranging from digestive troubles to chronic wounds and various skin conditions. The notion that fermented milk could help balance bodily health was grounded not in our modern understanding of microbiology, but within the complex spiritual and humoral theories of Egyptian medicine. They conceptualized health as a delicate balance influenced by divine forces, bodily fluids, and cosmic order. Even so, their empirical observations revealed that fermented milk indeed seemed to aid recovery and promote wellness. Imagine the scene in an ancient Egyptian healer's clinic. A patient arrives, perhaps suffering from a persistent skin rash or an infected wound that refuses to heal. The healer, equipped with knowledge passed down through generations, prepares a poultice, blending fermented milk with honey and herbs known for their soothing or antiseptic qualities. This thick, creamy mixture would be carefully applied to the afflicted area, with the healer explaining its virtues in terms of restoring harmony to the body and warding off malevolent spirits. Unbeknownst to them, the lactic acid present in fermented milk was gently exfoliating dead skin cells, encouraging tissue regeneration, and the probiotics were likely helping to inhibit harmful bacteria. Today, science confirms these effects, lending a surprising validation to these ancient remedies. Among the most famous surviving medical texts is the Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating back to approximately 1600 BCE, which is among the earliest known treatises on surgical trauma and wound care. This papyrus explicitly references the use of milk and dairy products for treating wounds and various skin ailments, highlighting their recognized medicinal value. This evidence underscores that ancient Egyptians were keen observers of the natural world, capable of discerning practical healing properties even if their interpretations were couched in spiritual or symbolic terms. A particularly quirky detail from historical studies reveals that these fermented milk treatments were sometimes mixed with less appealing substances, such as animal fats or crushed insects, forming ointments with potent effects, though likely not very pleasant to the senses. Such combinations were common in ancient pharmacopoeias worldwide, and while the smell and texture might seem off-putting to us today, these concoctions had their place in a culture where effective healing trumped sensory comfort. Scholars continue to debate the prevalence of these remedies, questioning whether they were reserved for the elite who could afford such care or if they were accessible to the broader population, especially in rural areas. The medicinal use of fermented milk illustrates a fascinating blending of categories that modern medicine often treats separately. In ancient Egyptian thought, food, medicine, and hygiene formed a continuum rather than distinct spheres. Fermented milk served as nourishment, topical treatment, and cleansing agent simultaneously. This holistic approach to health reflected a worldview where physical well-being was intimately connected with spiritual purity and cosmic balance. Maintaining health was not merely a matter of physical care, but a sacred duty to sustain Ma'at, the divine order that governed the universe. So when you reach for a modern probiotic yogurt, it is worth pausing to reflect on how deeply rooted this practice is in human history. The ancient Egyptians, with their fermented milk baths and medicinal poultices, were among the earliest to harness nature's pharmacy, using these resources to promote healing and well-being in a world without modern drugs. Their legacy reminds us of the profound connection between tradition and science, observation and belief, body and spirit. Next, as we explore further, we will delve into some of the major scholarly debates surrounding the effectiveness and prevalence of these hygiene and medicinal practices. How common were fermented milk baths and treatments outside the elite? Were these remedies genuinely effective or more symbolic than practical? These questions continue to animate research, shedding light on the complexities of ancient Egyptian life and medicine, and offering lessons on the enduring interplay of culture, health, and environment. By now, as you reflect on the details we've explored about ancient Egyptian hygiene and bathing practices, especially those involving fermented milk, you might find yourself wondering about the line between everyday reality and idealized ritual. How widespread were these habits really? Were they luxuries reserved for the elite? Or did ordinary Egyptians partake regularly? Historians and archaeologists continue to debate the extent and effectiveness of these practices, because the evidence, while fascinating, often paints a complex and sometimes contradictory picture. There is, without a doubt, an impressive body of archaeological evidence that attests to the importance of cleanliness and grooming in ancient Egyptian society, particularly among the upper classes. Excavations have revealed countless basins, jars for oils and perfumes, scrapers and combs, and remnants of ointments and creams that speak to a sophisticated culture of personal care. Tomb paintings and inscriptions frequently depict scenes of daily life and ritual cleansing, emphasizing the cultural value placed on purity, not only physical but spiritual as well. These portrayals suggest that bathing and grooming were not merely pragmatic acts, but carried symbolic weight tied to religious beliefs and social status. Among the elite, bathing rituals often involved carefully prepared baths infused with fragrant oils, fermented milk, and aromatic herbs. These ingredients weren't chosen at random, but were part of an established tradition that combined health, beauty, and spirituality. The use of fermented milk, in particular, reveals a level of empirical observation and experimentation, recognizing its benefits for skin health and hygiene long before modern science could explain them. The sophistication of these preparations, along with the involvement of servants and attendants, indicates that for wealthy Egyptians, bathing was an elaborate and valued daily ritual. Medical papyri and funerary texts lend further support to this idea. They mention the use of dairy products, oils, and herbal concoctions for both cosmetic and medicinal purposes. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, for example, details treatments involving milk and other natural substances for wounds and skin ailments, underscoring the practical health benefits Egyptians attributed to these materials. Some mummies even show traces of ointments and substances that may have included fermented milk products, demonstrating that these hygiene practices extended into death rituals as well. However, when we turn to the broader population, the picture becomes less clear. Access to fresh water was often limited, especially in rural areas and among the poor. While the Nile was a crucial water source, transporting and storing water for personal hygiene was labor-intensive and costly. Fermented milk, oils, and exotic herbs were expensive commodities, likely out of reach for the majority of Egyptians who lived modest lives. For these people, hygiene may have been far simpler: occasional rinses, using sand or natron as cleansers, and relying on whatever water was available. Some historians caution that the grand images of perfectly groomed nobles and priests may have obscured the reality faced by most Egyptians. Archaeological surveys of settlements suggest that public bathing facilities, if they existed outside temple complexes, were not widespread. Private baths were rare, and most people probably relied on basic water jars and simple washing. The dusty, arid environment would have made complete cleanliness challenging, and economic and social constraints likely dictated hygiene routines. The debate intensifies when it comes to fermented milk baths. Some scholars posit that these were more ceremonial or medicinal treatments than everyday hygiene. Fermented milk baths might have been reserved for religious festivals, temple rituals, or preparations for important life events such as weddings or royal ceremonies. In this view, the milk bath was a symbol of purity and rejuvenation, a luxurious indulgence rather than a routine practice. Supporting this argument, textual sources often place these baths in religious or elite contexts, while common folk texts are scarce. On the other hand, there is reason to believe that fermented milk may have had a broader application, given the Egyptians' practical orientation toward health and cleanliness, and the relatively accessible nature of dairy farming in certain regions. It is plausible that some form of fermented milk bathing or skincare was known and valued beyond the aristocracy. Yet, concrete evidence is limited, leaving this question tantalizingly open. An intriguing, quirky point that emerges from recent scholarship is the complexity of Egyptian bathing environments. Certain temples featured elaborate purification rooms with basins, drainage systems, and spaces dedicated to ritual washing. These early plumbing-like features illustrate a sophisticated approach to hygiene within religious precincts. Yet how often the average Egyptian could access or participate in such facilities remains uncertain. Moreover, there is a fascinating cultural layer to consider. Bathing and cleanliness were tightly intertwined with Egyptian spirituality and notions of cosmic order. The very act of cleansing was understood as more than physical. It was a metaphysical renewal, a restoration of harmony with the divine. This spiritual framing might mean that some practices were performed less for practical hygiene and more as ritual obligations, further complicating the question of everyday usage. The evidence from mummies provides additional insights, but also puzzles. Skin analyses show indications of cleanliness and care, including traces of oils and ointments. But how frequently these were applied is unknown. It is clear, however, That grooming was an integral part of personal identity, with combs, mirrors, and razors often found in tombs. This suggests a cultural emphasis on presenting oneself well, both in life and death. A broader challenge in interpreting ancient Egyptian hygiene lies in the nature of the sources. Texts, art, and artifacts often reflect idealized images, religious ideals, or elite perspectives, making it difficult to generalize for the entire society. Archaeology offers material clues, but cannot always reveal nuances like frequency or exact social scope. Consequently, historians must piece together a mosaic from fragmentary evidence and interpretive hypotheses. Thus, the question of how common and effective these hygiene and bathing practices were among ordinary Egyptians remains open. The practices involving fermented milk and other luxurious substances likely coexisted alongside simpler, more pragmatic routines. Perhaps the image of the milk bath was aspirational or symbolic for many, representing ideals of purity and health that guided behavior, even if never fully attained. In this sense, ancient Egyptian hygiene was not a monolith, but a spectrum shaped by social status, economic means, geography, and cultural values. A farmer in a remote village faced different realities than a priest in Thebes or a noble in Memphis. Yet across this diversity, the central cultural theme endures. Cleanliness was deeply tied to health, spirituality, and social identity. Reflecting on this, it becomes clear that history often inhabits the gray zones rather than clear-cut narratives. The mysteries and debates surrounding Egyptian bathing and fermented milk use invite us to appreciate the complexity of human experience in antiquity. It reminds us that the past is not merely a static record, but a dynamic field of interpretation, discovery, and ongoing inquiry. As you ponder these historical layers, consider how ancient practices laid the groundwork for later traditions and how the ancient Egyptian legacy still resonates in modern ideas of hygiene, beauty, and wellness. The next step in our exploration will be to trace the influence of these customs beyond Egypt's borders, to see how the ideas of purity, bathing, and medicinal use of fermented milk traveled and transformed across neighboring cultures and epochs. As you envision the mighty Nile River flowing through the heart of ancient Egypt, its waters carrying not only life-sustaining moisture, but also the currents of culture, technology, and tradition, it becomes clear that Egyptian bathing customs were far from isolated phenomena. Rather, they formed part of a dynamic and extensive web of exchange that wove together the diverse peoples and civilizations of the ancient Near East and Mediterranean. Particularly intriguing among these customs was the practice of using fermented milk in bathing and medicinal routines, a unique and emblematic tradition that not only reflected Egypt's innovative approach to hygiene and health, but also echoed beyond its borders, influencing neighboring cultures and engaging in a dialogue with their own rituals and practices. The ancient world was a sprawling network of interconnected trade routes, political alliances, conquests, and migrations, forming a vibrant mosaic where ideas and commodities crossed deserts, mountains, and seas. Egypt, with its fertile river valley and prosperous cities, was a key player in this cultural interchange. Its interactions with Nubia to the south, various peoples of the Levant to the northeast, and Mediterranean civilizations such as the Minoans, Greeks, and later Romans, ensured a constant flow of goods, knowledge, and customs. As these civilizations came into contact, they not only exchanged luxury items like gold, incense, and textiles, but also shared less tangible assets, technologies, religious concepts, artistic motifs, and yes, even approaches to personal care and hygiene. One of the more tangible footprints of Egyptian influence lies in the archaeological record, which reveals the diffusion of fermented dairy products used for skincare and medical treatments beyond Egypt's frontiers. Nubia, a region south of Egypt along the Nile known for its rich resources and its own complex societies, shows evidence of similar practices, hinting at cultural borrowing and adaptation. In the Levant, including areas that correspond to modern-day Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan, remnants of fermented milk products, ointments, and related rituals also appear in the archaeological and textual record, suggesting that the Egyptians' techniques and beliefs traveled along with trade caravans and diplomatic envoys. These regions did not simply imitate Egyptian customs wholesale, but instead localized them, blending Egyptian elements with their own indigenous traditions to create hybrid practices. While fermented milk baths held a particular place of esteem in Egyptian culture, celebrated for their exfoliating, moisturizing, and therapeutic properties, other ancient civilizations approached the concept of acidic baths differently. The Greeks and Romans, for example, prized wine and vinegar-based bathing rituals, appreciating the astringent and cleansing effects of the acids in these liquids. To modernize, this divergence can appear quirky or even amusing, a sort of ancient debate between milk or wine as the key to glowing skin. Did the Greeks and Romans derive their preferences from Egyptian prototypes? Or did they arrive at similar solutions independently through their own empirical experimentation? Scholars continue to discuss this question, acknowledging both the possibility of direct cultural transmission and the likelihood of parallel development prompted by shared environmental and health concerns. Imagining the lively banter among ancient spa patrons or healers, perhaps an Egyptian priestess extolling the virtues of lactic acid while a Roman matron champions her vinegar soak, offers a whimsical glimpse into how personal care practices could reflect broader cultural identities and rivalries. Each empire, each society, celebrated its own recipes and rituals as markers of sophistication and divine favor. The adoption of Egyptian-inspired bathing customs by neighboring cultures carried profound symbolic weight as well. Egypt, long considered a land of mystique, spiritual depth, and unparalleled antiquity, held enormous prestige in the ancient world. Its religious practices, monumental architecture, and elaborate court rituals symbolized cosmic order and divine authority. Thus, to incorporate Egyptian bathing rituals, such as fermented milk baths, was more than a quest for health or beauty. It was a means of aligning oneself with the grandeur and sanctity that Egypt represented. Rulers, priests, and elites in adjacent regions might adopt these practices to signal their connection to the sacred or to demonstrate their cultural refinement and political legitimacy. Yet, the reach of Egyptian cultural influence fluctuated with the tides of history. During periods of Egyptian expansion or political ascendancy, such as the New Kingdom, Egyptian customs and religious ideas spread widely, often imposed or emulated by neighboring states. Conversely, during times of Egyptian decline or foreign domination, these influences sometimes waned or were supplanted by the traditions of dominant new powers. For example, during the Persian, Greek, and Roman periods, local and foreign customs mingled in complex ways, and Egyptian bathing practices evolved or receded in the face of new social and political realities. Thus, the story of fermented milk baths and related hygiene rituals is not one of unbroken continuity, but of cultural conversation, a tapestry woven from threads of adoption, adaptation, resistance, and innovation. Ancient Egyptian hygiene was a living tradition that both shaped and was shaped by its interactions with surrounding peoples. Looking forward through history, one can trace the echoes of these customs in later bathing practices throughout the Mediterranean and Near East. The Roman emphasis on bathing as a social and cleansing ritual owes something, perhaps indirectly, to earlier Egyptian and Levantine traditions. In the Byzantine and Islamic worlds, ideas about cleanliness and purification retained links to ancient precedents, adapted to new religious and cultural contexts. Even the ritual use of milk in some folk remedies and beauty treatments can be seen as a distant legacy of these ancient innovations. This rich intercultural interplay reveals that hygiene, beauty, and health were not just personal matters, but were deeply embedded in the social and political fabric of civilizations. The ritual of bathing, whether in fermented milk or vinegars, was a nexus where health, religion, identity, and diplomacy converged. As you ponder the journey of Egyptian fermented milk baths from the Nile Valley to neighboring lands and across epochs, consider how these traditions remind us of the interconnectedness of human cultures. No civilization exists in isolation, and even the most intimate practices, like cleansing one's body, bear the imprint of exchange and adaptation. Our next step will be to examine how these ancient bathing rituals evolved further or faded away as Egypt faced conquests, changing dynasties, and shifting religious landscapes. We will explore how new rulers incorporated, modified, or replaced these customs, and how the legacy of Egyptian hygiene practices persisted or transformed in the millennia that followed. As the relentless march of time swept over the ancient world, empires rose and fell, each leaving its indelible mark on the land of the Nile and its cherished customs. Among these enduring traditions were the bathing practices of the ancient Egyptians, with the famed fermented milk baths standing out as a symbol of purity, health, and spiritual cleansing. Yet, as the centuries unfolded, these customs did not remain static. Rather, they faced profound transformations and adaptations under successive waves of rulers, from the Persians and Greeks to the Romans, and later the Islamic dynasties, each introducing new cultural influences that reshaped how hygiene, ritual, and daily life intertwined in Egypt. In the immediate aftermath of the pharaonic era, many of the traditional customs continued to hold sway, especially in rural and less accessible regions along the Nile. These areas, tied closely to the rhythms of agriculture and the river's seasonal cycles, were slow to embrace the sweeping changes brought by foreign conquerors. Here, the fermented milk baths and other ritualistic bathing practices remained more than just hygiene. They were deeply enmeshed in local spiritual life, health routines, and social identity. The persistence of these ancient habits in the countryside underscored the resilience of Egyptian culture amid political upheaval. However, the arrival of the Hellenistic period, following Alexander the Great's conquest, ushered in a new wave of cultural exchange and assimilation. The Ptolemies, rulers of Egypt after Alexander, were of Greek origin, and their reign introduced Greco-Roman aesthetics, philosophies, and public customs. Among these was the idea of public bathing as a communal and social activity, rather than a purely private or religious ritual. Bathhouses became centers not only of cleanliness, but of conversation, politics, and leisure, reflecting a shift in societal values and daily routines. During the Roman occupation, this shift became even more pronounced. The once private or sacred act of bathing was transformed into an elaborate public spectacle. Archaeological excavations reveal that Roman Egypt was home to sophisticated bath complexes, equipped with hypocaust heating systems, cold and hot plunge pools, and lavish decorations, often decorated with frescoes, mosaics, and statues. These grand bathhouses offered a communal experience where people from various walks of life gathered to relax, socialize, and even conduct business. The act of bathing, once steeped in spiritual symbolism and ritual purification, now bore the hallmarks of public entertainment and social cohesion. Despite this cultural overlay, the question remains, did the traditional Egyptian practices, particularly the fermented milk baths, survive this tidal wave of change? Historians debate the extent to which these ancient customs were maintained, adapted, or discarded. Evidence suggests that, while the use of fermented milk baths may have diminished in daily practice, they likely persisted in more private, ritualistic, or ceremonial contexts. Priests, traditional healers, and conservative segments of the population may have continued to employ these baths as part of their spiritual and medicinal repertoire, preserving an ancient heritage beneath the veneer of Greco-Roman customs. The arrival of Christianity brought another layer of reinterpretation. Early Christian writers and clerics sometimes regarded Egyptian bathing rituals with ambivalence, admiring their emphasis on purity and cleanliness, yet condemning them as relics of pagan superstition. The new religion sought to redefine spiritual purity through different rites and moral codes, leading to a reconfiguration of bathing's symbolic meaning. Public bathhouses faced criticism or decline in certain periods due to associations with licentious behavior, while private hygiene practices adapted to the evolving religious landscape. Later, under Islamic rule, Egypt experienced further cultural transformations that reshaped personal hygiene and bathing customs. Islamic teachings emphasized cleanliness and ritual purity, formalized through practices such as wudu, ablution, before prayer, and ghusl, full-body ritual washing. Public baths, or hammams, flourished as essential social institutions, blending cleanliness, community, and spirituality. The hammam tradition, though different in form and ritual from ancient Egyptian baths, continued the cultural value placed on washing and purity. Throughout these changes, the legacy of the ancient Egyptian fermented milk baths became entwined with evolving concepts of cleanliness, health, and spirituality. Although the specific practice of milk bathing likely receded from mainstream use, its influence remained in the broader cultural fabric, inspiring new approaches and adaptations. The notion of bathing as a holistic practice encompassing physical, spiritual, and social dimensions persisted, albeit expressed through new materials, rituals, and technologies. The historical record also reflects a certain ambivalence and fascination with these ancient customs. Texts from early Christian and Islamic periods sometimes reference Egyptian bathing practices with a mixture of respect and critique. They oscillate between viewing these traditions as expressions of divine order and as pagan or outdated rituals. This ambivalence underscores the complex ways in which cultural practices are reinterpreted through successive layers of belief and governance. What emerges from this long arc of history is a picture of Egyptian bathing customs as dynamic, evolving phenomena. They were not fixed in time, but lived, changed, and sometimes blended into new forms that reflected the prevailing social, religious, and political climates. The iconic image of queens luxuriating in fermented milk baths may belong to a bygone era, but the ideas and values they embodied, the pursuit of purity, health, and spiritual harmony, continued to resonate and find expression across centuries. In contemplating this enduring legacy, one realizes that the history of hygiene and bathing is more than a chronicle of changing habits. It is a story of cultural identity, resilience, and adaptation. The fermented milk baths of ancient Egypt stand as a testament to human creativity and the quest for well-being, influencing not only their immediate surroundings, but also leaving ripples across time and cultures. As we bring this exploration to a close, it is fascinating to consider how these ancient practices quietly echo into the present. Modern beauty and wellness rituals, with their probiotics, exfoliants, and aromatic oils, carry faint whispers of the Nile's ancient waters and the luxurious milk baths of priestesses and queens. The cultural memory embedded in these practices connects us across millennia, reminding us of a shared human desire to care for our bodies and souls in harmony with nature. This journey through the transformation of Egyptian bathing customs invites us to appreciate the fluidity of tradition and the ways in which the past continually informs the present. The legacy of fermented milk baths is not a static relic, but a living thread woven into the ongoing tapestry of human health, beauty, and spirituality. As you allow the echoes of ancient Egyptian bathing rituals to settle gently in your mind, it becomes truly fascinating to observe how these age-old customs quietly ripple through to the present day, influencing modern wellness practices in ways both subtle and profound. Though you may not find yourself immersed in a tub of fermented milk today, the very essence of those ancient hygiene habits has survived, evolved, and been woven into contemporary beauty and health traditions. It's a testament to the enduring wisdom of those who first sought balance, purity, and rejuvenation through the nurturing embrace of natural elements. Consider for a moment the familiar experience of indulging in a milk bath at a modern spa, an indulgence often steeped in luxury and promise. Beneath this soothing ritual lies a heritage that stretches back thousands of years, reaching directly into the heart of ancient Egypt's reverence for fermented milk as a cornerstone of personal care. Today, the popularity of lactic acid, a naturally derived alpha-hydroxy acid extracted from fermented dairy, is a cornerstone of skincare science. It gently exfoliates dead skin cells, promotes hydration, and encourages the growth of fresh, radiant skin. When you run your fingers over a silky lotion or immerse yourself in a creamy soak, you are, in effect, connecting to a beauty secret first embraced by Egyptian royalty and priestesses centuries ago. This isn't merely coincidence or marketing flair. It reflects a genuine historical lineage across the globe. Fermented milk products remain central to many cultures' approaches to skincare and wellness, from yogurts to kefirs, and from traditional poultices to modern serums. The theme of blending fermented dairy with natural ingredients like honey, herbs, and oils endures. The Egyptians' intuitive understanding of these combinations, though framed within their own spiritual and medicinal worldviews, anticipated the holistic, gentle treatments many seek today. This enduring appeal speaks to a deep human desire to harmonize with nature and seek comfort and health from what the earth provides. What adds an intriguing layer to this story is the way the allure of ancient Egyptian beauty practices continues to captivate the modern imagination. Some niche beauty brands enthusiastically market fermented milk face masks, body washes, and lotions, often invoking the mystique of ancient Egyptian secrets in their product descriptions. Whether these marketing claims fully reflect historical accuracy or are crafted with a clever sense of branding savvy, they demonstrate the lasting fascination we hold for Egypt's cultural heritage. It's a vivid reminder that the splendor of those far-off times still shines through our contemporary rituals, offering a bridge across millennia. Yet, historians and scholars caution us against allowing this romanticized view to overshadow the more complex and sometimes less glamorous realities of ancient bathing practices. The rituals, while elegant and spiritually charged in art and texts, were also marked by gritty scrubs made from abrasive natural materials, the pungent odors of fermentation, and even the use of crocodile dung as a sunscreen, elements that today might cause a grimace or a chuckle. This tension between the mythic and the mundane enriches the narrative, reminding us that history is often lived in shades of complexity rather than in simple, sanitized stories. The act of cleansing, whether in the Nile's sacred waters or a marble spa tub, has long been tied to more than mere physical purity. It is an expression of identity, spirituality, and care, one that is adapted through countless cultural transformations. The ancient Egyptians' pursuit of cleanliness and sacred ritual bathing rituals laid foundational ideas about hygiene, health, and beauty that ripple through to us, sometimes subtly beneath our awareness, other times boldly through the products we cherish. As you imagine your own nightly routine, perhaps a splash of warm water, a gentle massage with scented oils, or the simple soothing application of a lotion, remember the journey that brought these pleasures to you. The quest for purity, rejuvenation, and comfort has been a shared human story, one that spans deserts and rivers, empires and eras. Each drop of water, each creamy bath, each fragrant oil carries whispers of those ancient rituals, patiently waiting beneath the surface of our everyday lives. Now, as you close your eyes and let your thoughts drift softly like the Nile's eternal flow, allow the calm that these traditions fostered to settle over you. Breathe deeply, feel the coolness of the evening air, and embrace the gentle continuity of human care and renewal. The journey through the history of Egyptian bathing customs has come to a peaceful pause, but its echoes live on in every quiet moment of your own self-care.